FY2026 budget and financial reporting update, Mr. Harris and Mr. Staley.
Well, that's coming down. So your typical finance update, three really chapters of story today. First and foremost, as we do, periodically, we'll walk through some EDA financials and sort of give an update on their portfolio of projects. To aid with that, got Brendan Staley here with me, who is co-counsel to the EDA, and we'll give you sort of not just the financial end of things, sort of the numbers, but some of the legal framework, which I think will be helpful. So without further ado, we will jump right into that in the interest of time.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Board. Thank you all for having me here. Happy to give you all a little bit of context, and I guess I'll steer at the same time. So Matt asked me to come out here this afternoon and talk a little bit about the Economic Development Authority's legal purposes and powers that it can exercise, particularly in the context of the county's growth and development. So I'm going to try to do that succinctly, but if you have questions or if you think I've said something confusing, please just interject, and I'm happy to answer any questions as we go. For background, y'all are likely aware, but the EDA is a separate political subdivision created by the county Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors created it back in 1968 and changed the name in 2005 to reflect its purpose as an economic development authority beyond just industrial development activities. And so it's constrained by the powers set forth in the IDA Act and also the Constitution of Virginia and Virginia case law. I didn't realize I'd start wave, so I apologize. Should have cleaned the formatting up. So the primary purposes that are relevant for the county and for y'all as the Board of Supervisors are really threefold. One is to promote industry and develop trade. So what that really means is economic development in the context of the county. The other two are overlapping, and it's to assist in the development of facilities for the county government and the schools. This is
and as
yes,
their purpose in assisting is to help in financing bonds for those facilities, and that's it. That's their total. And the land for the construction and
yes, that's
the bonds for the land and construction.
And we're going to spend more time on that point as we get further into the presentation. So yes, sir, absolutely.
That's right. And so this is an extract of some of the powers. It is not an exhaustive list of the EDA's powers, but it's the key ones that are typically exercised by the EDA in the context of fulfilling the county's economic development objectives and also assisting in the county's financing needs. Happy to go through them individually if helpful, but I think the list speaks for itself. And so the Virginia Code also gives the county a set of complementary powers. And again, this is not exhaustive, but these are the three that are most relevant. And so it can make donations and appropriations of money to the EDA. It can give, lend, or advance money or other property to the county, or to the EDA rather, and then also has the ability to acquire facilities, sites, and to transfer facility sites to the authority. And so one of the defined terms that's probably most relevant when you think about how the EDA exercises its powers is authority facility. It is a comprehensive definition. It describes a long list of kinds of facilities, but those that are most relevant, again, for your purposes when you're thinking about how the county uses the EDA, or it can finance parking facilities, it can finance various facilities for local governments, including the county, and also various commercial enterprises. And so the two primary roles or ways in which the EDA facilitates growth and development in the county are to issue bonds on behalf of or for the benefit of the county. And those are used to fund various public improvements and economic development projects, Typically, the bonds are payable from annual appropriations from the Board of Supervisors, so you all have the discretion as to whether or not to appropriate those payments to pay the debt service, and they're usually pursuant to a support agreement or financing agreement with the EDA. The second role that the county EDA plays is to engage in various land development and economic incentive transactions, and so that's what you regularly hear from when Garrett gives updates at the board meeting. So focusing on the first purpose that relates to financing, this is a context slide that speaks to how the county can finance various kinds of public improvements. Y'all are most accustomed probably to seeing general obligation bonds issued pursuant to a referendum. That's the first slide there, first bullet at the top. The second is the county can enter into financing arrangements with the Virginia Resources Authority. That is a subject to appropriation undertaking, much like the relationship with EDA financings. And finally, the EDA itself can issue bonds on behalf of or supported by the county, which is the primary role the EDA has played for county public improvements over the past several years.
So just to elaborate on that, so anything that we don't do GO, we have to go find another financing avenue to be able to do that. The most cost-efficient way for us to borrow money is through the EDA. That's as simple, as it is. If we use the VRA, which Bernie mentioned, there's extra fees. We pay a higher rate for that opportunity. So that is why, we use EDA as we do for the financing of county facilities.
And it's worth noting that the county's credit is higher than the VRA credit in terms of the credit rating. So the second purpose that I mentioned earlier is engaging in various land development and economic development incentive transactions. Land development takes the form of acquiring property, developing it, and positioning it for private investment. Two big examples the county has that are currently active are Meadowville and Upper Magnolia Green. I know y'all are very familiar with those projects. And then in terms of performance agreements, the county uses or leverages private investment by promising incremental tax revenues in a rebate arrangement effectively. And so incentivizes targeted economic development or private investment.
Any questions for Brendan before we kind of get into we're going to go through and add some meat to those bones, but while Brendan's at the table, any questions for him on sort of the legal backdrop for this?
I have a question. So how many times does the EDA initiate any of these items on its own without any input from the county?
Oh, well, I think that's probably a better question for Mr. Hart, but
Okay.
I think the answer to that would be it is a county-initiated agenda by and
The
large.
answer is never.
No. Well, and on the financing side, the EDA doesn't have the revenues to pay the debt service if it were to issue bonds without county backing. So,
Anything to add to that, Mr. Hart? All right, very good. So this slide, I think, just again, we use the EDA. The primary way we use it is for conduit financing, and to just give some context to what that is. So it's not just, slides or bullet on a slide. These are the projects that we're talking about that are currently financed through the EDA that are county facilities. So these are not things that have, I apologize, is going around. But these are not economic development projects. I think Brandon gave it to me, actually. Excuse me. Gerard's going to come up and come back to the slide in 1 second. Sorry. Where at?
Seems to happen every time you and I present together.
Oh, I'm going to blame my kids.
I mean, I could just step in for a second. I mean, what Mr. Harris is just trying to summarize is twofold. And of the $430 million, it goes without saying, $311 million was something that you were deeply involved with as far as allocating our 50% discretionary share of the CVTA funds. And again, those are all appropriations projects through Transportation Department, but the funding source was a CVTA. It also helps leverage what could be federal and state sources and shows that we have skin in the game. So we're never done with whatever our road projects, we try and do it. The 6 or 7 bullets, again, going back even to Mr. Ingles' comment, those are county projects. Those are county projects that the Board of Supervisors has wanted, or they are projects that may have been initiated and proposed by a department of the county or the schools, for which all of them have gone through a county lens, through county authorization. If it's known far in advance, it's through our capital improvements program and our annual budget resolutions that you as a board adopt after public hearings. If things arise during the year, because it's timely and needs to get done, again, they have to follow the same prescribed practices.
Yeah, the other one to note on there is the school's major maintenance package at the bottom, also done through an EDA conduit finance, which was certainly a milestone accomplishment of this board.
So if a citizen was to say they FOIA'd the EDA and the EDA is doing hundreds of millions of dollars of EDA projects in the
Exactly.
county, what the EDA did was issue bonds on behalf of the county as the mechanism to issue the bonds for projects that are taking place in the county that are not anything other than trying to put in the CIP that has been approved by this board. It's not an economic development fund that they're just going crazy and spending all this money on all their projects. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
That's precisely correct, yes, sir.
And I would say, without doing heavy math right now, because of the low interest rate that we can get because of the county's credit rating and the EDA powers, we were able to leverage $430 million. Probably the same debt service payment at a higher interest rate would have consumed more of it into interest and not into principal. So our value of what we could have spent on projects is probably in the $300 to $400 million range, not 430.
Yeah, the EDA does not charge us fees, given that we're the same entity, essentially. We pay a lower interest rate, so it absolutely maximizes the amount of proceeds that can go into projects.
And just to make the point kind of real clear in that none of this can happen without the blessing of our community because it has to go through a referendum.
No, sir.
They go through a public hearing process. General obligation bonds go through referendums.
Okay.
These are other projects that arise intermittently between referendum years, which we have every 5 to 7 years.
Right.
But the $311 million, just focus on that. That has arisen as a new funding source and a new mechanism to leverage already an annual cash flow from CVTA that we didn't want to wait, if you will, years to get things done. So,
Right.
But it was subject to the rightful public hearings as far as an appropriation. And the public hearings that go with it and the comments.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chair. Matt, can you just touch base a little bit on what projects, in 2020, I remember when we actually restructured debt to get caught up on some major maintenance projects with the schools, I think to the tune of like 120 million, something like that?
So, yeah, this 57 that's up here is the byproduct of that effort from 2020. This is the debt component, so we did some cash as well. Yes, sir. Or CARES and I mean all the things you've heard about today already. Yes, sir.
And what were some of those projects that the school utilized it for?
This is HVAC and major system replacements throughout the division. Deferred needs that had.
Right, if I
built
remember
up.
correctly, prior to that, we had schools that had Legionella disease supposedly in the coolers and everything else, right?
Yes, sir. And this really got us back to square one.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Brennan before we get into the project by project? Thank you, sir. Yeah, if you just hang around. You wanna come over here? Go for it.
Okay. We thought we'd go through some of the kind of 4 major kind of
projects, as it were, that's been undertaken through the EDA over the last 20 or so years. First one being Meadowville Technology Park. We took control of that property in 2005. The initial assessment, as you can see on there, was about $8.9 million. The interchange there opened up in 2012. To date, including interest, the investment there has been over $90 million. That said, the net local cost to us has been about a shade under $39.5 million. But the cumulative revenue to date generated from that through the various tax streams, real estate, business, personal property taxes, is about $43.2 million.
So we're, another way to say that is we're break even to date on our investment in the dirt there, not the recurring stream, but break even on, investment to date.
And just to be clear, that is the plan for the EDA. They buy the land, whatever they put into the cost to develop it, they take those two costs, add them together, and they use that as the basis for selling the property to break even with the intent to where you're going to have recurring increased revenues. Correct?
The goal is to get to that point, which Gerard will get to in a second, when we have that annual contribution to the operating budget, which is where Meadowville is now.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just add to that too, with it under the EDA control and the closeness of the EDA to the county, this isn't just a developer trying to sell off parcels of land for anyone who wants to buy something. It goes without saying, a private sector developer holding something in 2005 would have probably already developed the Lego site into some warehousing of some sort, if in fact there was a willing buyer at a good land sale transaction. We, working with the EDA, when I'm saying we, the county board, has been mindful to say, this is premier site, let's wait for a premier customer, which you wouldn't be able to do that if it was entirely private.
Annually, as of right now, the park is producing about $5.5 million in direct tax revenue. We do have some outstanding debt on the park itself, so once you deduct that, it's a net additional revenue to the county of about $3.9 million as it stands today. The 2025 assessment, we'll be going over that topic with Mr. Bloomfield will as we go through this presentation, is at $356.9 million. So just for some context, back in 2005, it was 8.9. Now it's sitting at 356.9, a 40x jump since 2005.
And the difference in the 5 in the assessment is other business taxes that are collected in the park.
Yep.
Non-real estate contributions.
Yep. And based on the current development schedule, most notably Lego, we are anticipating additional estimated revenues from the various tax streams of anywhere between $7 to $9 million. So all in all, once it's fully up and built out, we're expected to receive projected recurring contribution towards the general fund of about $13+ million from various tax revenue streams.
Or, as Mr. Engel, as you would say, at its full build out, it's worth 2 pennies on the rate. All clear of every outstanding, piece of debt and other expenses.
All right, second one we're going to talk about today is Cloverleaf and Stonebridge. The assessed value of that in 1995, as you can see there, was $60 million. As when the CDA was dissolved in 2023, the assessed value there was about $142.8 million. Annual revenue stream coming in from there is about 1.84, with net expenses of just over $1 million.
So, Cloverleaf's a little different story in that this is where Meadowville's a green site development. We're going in trying to have a home for future industrial development. Cloverleaf was, like you see in mid-90s, a pretty substantial regional mall, and you see it crater down to $11 million. Before we really took ownership, it just, sort of fell into disrepair. So the reason for getting involved here, kind of to Mr. Engel's original question, was trying to, put a flag down at this important end of Midlothian Turnpike and really try to revitalize that area. So each one of these panels in this presentation has a different motivation, a different reason we were involved, and just wanted to note that for the audience. I worked on this one from the get-go, and there's never been a general fund pull from the work at Cloverleaf. The revenues have always exceeded expenses, and it's encapsulated within the CDA here. So I think that's an important point to note. Again, it's got a different financial makeup, a different financial pro forma than Meadowville, but it has been a plus contributor from the get-go.
And we had to use a CDA in this one because the returns were not considered by investors as positive as maybe something we did across the street that we did in a different manner because
Yes, sir.
we had to use the CDA structure here because that was the only financing mechanism that we could really use to be able to move forward. Is that correct?
Exactly. If we could have avoided the CDA, we would have, because it has administrative expenses. It gave an extra layer of insurance and protection to the lending community on this project, which we had never done before. And it was sort of broke new ground for us and really for a lot in local government. So that's why that structure was there. That's why we pulled it away prematurely, because it just performed so well over time we didn't need it anymore. So there was no point in paying $50,000 of administrative expenses every single year to have that structure in place when it's just not needed.
Like Meadowville, we still have a small amount of debt outstanding. It is expected to be paid off in 2032. The current rate on that is about 2.89%, far less than the prevailing market rates that we see today. And then the ultimate revenue contribution to the county will increase as the final parcels are fully built out as well. So moving on to Upper Magnolia, this was an area that we were looking to acquire land for several years, just given the nature of the development in that area of the county. In 2020, we were approached to buy a parcel of land a little over 2,000 acres, which the board elected to do. It was purchased for about $13 million. We used it as part of through the year-end process for fiscal year 20. Primary motive, as I said, was to have land for county infrastructure and facilities, most notably 3 schools and a library system that are all part of the bond referendum package that you all voted on. But at the same time, well, before I get into that, for some context, $13 million for 2,000 acres, we actually went back and looked to see how much it would be per acre if we had to buy these land parcels separately. And based on the last 2 school land purchases we made, we paid about $30,000 an acre. For context, this, when you take the 13 million by the 2,000, was $6,000 per acre. So if you extrapolate that out, if you take $30,000 an acre for that amount, you'd have been paying upwards of over $60 million for a similar parcel of land if we'd bought it at that value that we'd paid for prior parcels for schools.
And the $30,000 is just the last we had on the books. So if you went out to Western Hall Street, Mr. Carroll can tell you'd be hard pressed to get it for $30,000 an acre. We're just using the last sale that we have on the books as the county. So that's how we got to that number.
Yeah. But also taking the opportunity to improve the road and utility networks in that area of the county. You can see some of the projects that are undergoing right now. The investment in that area is about $79.1 million from the county. Largest component of that is the North-South Collector Road, which is being funded through CVTA bonds, not through the general fund. The tract was rezoned in 2022 into split into a kind of east and west component. The west component has an economic development component to it. However, the work, as you are well aware, has been primarily funded through the state with the award of 2 business ready grants, one for $25 million and the other for $13 million.
So a lot of moving parts here. I think to summarize again for everybody, it's really 2 projects. The primary motivation here, the county's perspective, was to get these infrastructure sites to try to catch up on the facility needs out there. And so that's what you see really on the bulk of this slide. There is an economic development. It's sort of that next, where do you go after Meadowville? Is sort of the thought process. That's the western portion of this. And to date, all of that site work and prep has been funded through those state grants. So you really kind of think it's Upper Mag, but you really kind of think of it as an A and a B component. The A component, for the 2 of us, is the infrastructure that's needed and well underway. And really worth noting that Deep Run Middle School, that is one of those projects that's sitting there on that track right now today.
I didn't go into ROI on the others, but on this one, Just out of curiosity, if we had to purchase the site for 3 schools and a library in general throughout the county, what could that look like? I believe Midlothian Middle is going to be north of 10 million just to try to, if we buy something that's off-site from the current school. What would that look like? Because there's a lot of people that think that we went out and wasted $13 million of taxpayer dollars for some economic development project, and we're getting 3 schools and a library. We paid $13 million for the land. I just want to understand, or have the citizens understand, what that looks like.
I think you're easily in the $30 to $50 million range, depending on what part of the county you're looking at. And that was, kind of the math that Gerard touched on at the beginning of this. But absolutely to get, and we're only using a portion of it. The 2,000 is the entirety of this, includes the economic development track, as well as all of these infrastructure sites.
Mr. Chair, just to even add greater context, it's not so much the deal in purchasing land that is now converted over to schools and libraries. It's converting over what is otherwise pre-zoned already of hundreds of homes that we are taking out of the equation. So there's a secondary benefit, and that also takes the pressure off of the school systems in addition. I think I set Mr. Carroll up for it.
Well, besides the about 1,400 homes that was removed from the Upper Mag case, there was also about 911 houses that are part of this East case, and I think the people will see in a month or so when we drop a zoning case for this that we're actually going to pull those houses. None of them are built now, but we're going to remove them from the zoning and convert the land that's around the schools and the library into a conservation easement. And that's coming forward, I think, in another month or so. But, that's something we had talked about doing, and it just took us a while to get it in place. But that removes a significant amount of trips per day from the area, which we, quite frankly, needed to in order to be able to put the schools in here. And then, of course, the road improvements that are going to come out of this, which are funded and which are on a timeline to be completed before the high school opens its doors and the middle school opens its doors. They are on timeline to be done. We are fast-tracking this in the best way we possibly could by August of 2026, because this zoning case, when it was passed, one of the requirements in the case was that no other facilities other than the middle school could be built on this land until the north-south connector road was built. And so all of that is going to happen in the next 2 years. But before that elementary school can open up in 2026, which the middle will open in 2025, and they are flying on it. It will be ready. And we did the groundbreaking on the elementary school the other day. But these are all needed projects that was sitting there as we continued to have houses come out of the ground in the western part of the county, which were going to eventually overcrowd the schools. And so when they come out of the ground completely, we will be in a much better position capacity-wise at our elementary schools, our middle schools, and our high schools. And not to mention we'll have a brand-new library out there, which we only have one in the western part of Hull Street right now, which is the Clover Hill Library, which is servicing upwards of over 80,000 people. So it's sorely needed.
Yeah, I think, again, thank Mr. Staley for his remarks. But this is a good example of where the county uses all of the powers in the EDA toolkit to achieve the goals of the county. We're using the financing end of this and the economic development end of it, issuing bonds through the EDA via the CVTA. So this really kind of covers the entirety of his presentation that shows the full range of what the EDA can do and how the county has effectively leveraged that to achieve what have been really, really critical missions for us over the last several years.
Moving back to the kind of northern area of the county, Springline at District 60, kind of similar to Upper Mag, there are kind of a cascading effect from this project. For the county itself, there will be a new county-owned police station. As you all remember from the bond referendum, we're building 4. They're all currently leased right now. This will be county-owned, freeing up the rent that we are paying on the current station. Most notably, as part of this, is it will be actually able to reclaim 41,000 square feet of academic space at CTC Hull. That'll increase the student capacity by an additional 600 students, and it's estimated that that'll actually save, once you do a cost comparison between the renovation at CTC Hull and building a new school facility, savings of $35 million. And then finally, that final piece of the cascade is going to consolidate the school administration operations from just over the way and at CTC Hall into one central location. And then also do the same thing for the registrar on the county site, moving again out of some of the leases that we are currently paying for some registrar locations as well. So the county involvement in this project, we had the initial land purchase up there of $16 million. We issued through the EDA a $23 million bond issuance to invest in the infrastructure to be able to develop the site. And then we have invested a little shade over $25 million towards parking deck. Different for the county, first of its kind for Chesterfield. Benefit of that being that, we're maximizing the amount of space that can be used for other buildings, for retail, for residential development, as opposed to a kind of larger footprint of having a surface lot on the site. But the main part of this is, that initial investment that's been made by the county, once you bring in the private sector, opens up the opportunity for upwards of $1 billion in private investments in the site itself.
Another good example of a blend of all the missions. Again, the primary motivation, the reason that we're talking about Springline, first and foremost, was sort of the continuation of the revitalization energy from Cloverleaf hopping across 60. It absolutely, looking to continue that momentum and that success in the eastern end of Midlothian Turnpike. But then, like you said, they're up here in order for a reason. This is an infrastructure play to be able to take CTC Hall. It's either go and construct, I think what Gerard's saying is go and construct space for that 600 seats for technical education that we've got waiting list today for kids that want to get into those programs and employers that want to hire them. So that was a need. And so, how do you do that was the question. You already have a school that's built as a school, returning that to academic instruction, consolidating admin functions down here at a site that also, checks the box of the revitalization. So, kind of like Upper Mag, this checks many boxes, it has many layers, and uses the full power of the EDA. But again, going back, Mr. England, to your question, these are county, and in this case, some school board initiated, objectives and missions that, were tossed out, and this is the way that we're able to accomplish, many, many things down there at this important juncture.
And then finally, just in the interest of time, we've put on there the full build-out schedule of the 42 acres to include townhomes and retail and residential space that we'd mentioned earlier as well.
On the return on investment, just to talk about big picture on that, with the $35 million in savings on building new schools, the $4 million that we were going to spend just to get the police station in that location, that's right at $39 million. We will have approximately $64 million in it. Take $35 million out, or $39 million out, you're about $25 million. And $1 billion of investment is probably going to be somewhere in the magnitude of at least a penny on the tax rate, $6.5 million-ish a year. So you're not looking at maybe 4 to 5 years after build out, but during that time, we're also going to be bringing in more revenue. So it's less than a 10-year repayment on this if people want to look at it with an ROI from a different angle.
And certainly the $35 million is, if we were to put that out to bid, I mean, that's schools kind of doing that, their best estimates. But I think in this current environment, we'd be really lucky to hit $35 million. So that number's probably a good bit higher.
I'm just using that as a conservative
just noting that,
estimate if somebody wanted to know, because people think that we don't look at what we're putting out and what that's going to return, because we don't use the exact same formulas in return on investment as a business does. But in general, we are asking those questions, and we're trying to figure out how long it should take to be able to recover those funds for the citizens.
Well, I think you can, and I hear that point as well. But I think as you see in these 4 examples, they're all so different. The reasons, the players, the approach. There isn't a cookie cutter way that we go about doing these deals, and I think that's one of the messages we wanted to push out today.
Could I, Mr. Chair, just in one line or two, your return on investment and how you look at it, how we look at it conservatively, this is just for the on-site return on investment. So it goes without saying the peripheral properties and the investments that are occurring and the activities we're getting outside of the initial circles, especially Meadowville Tech Park and Springline Stonebridge. Upper Magnolia is sort of an island itself that's a separate topic, but it goes without saying, the Boulders is improved because of Springline and connectivity. So the values of not just what is there being preserved, but being enhanced. We don't count that in any metric.
I just think it's important for the citizens to understand that, because we don't spend a lot of time talking about that. So I think some citizens have assumed that we don't take that into consideration, because that's not exactly the way government always goes about looking at things. But it is important that the money that we're spending on behalf of the citizens is done efficiently and brings a good return for our citizens. So I think it's important for them to understand that.
Yes, sir. And real quick, last slide on this part, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Bluefield for his reval update. These are other areas where the EDA is tossed in from time to time. So just as Dr. Case said, some quick one-liners here. Chester Arts Center is an EDA project only in that they executed the vision there after it was a 2004 bond referendum effort that wasn't completed in time because of the recession. We borrowed through the EDA, has been touched on here, and so they executed what the citizens had already approved in 2004. The lake, which sits across from Southside Speedway, it's not an EDA project at all. There's a performance agreement in place. Nothing has been paid out to date. Not anything special there. There's been no investment by the county or the EDA in that effort.
And we never pay out up front. Anything that they would
That's
get in
correct.
that performance agreement is a rebate on the back end of their dollars that they've already paid into us. There's no dollars that come from the general fund to fund that.
That's right. And you heard Mr. Staley say that's a permissible use, and that's the way we do it. If this project succeeds, then they get to enjoy the performance agreement that's been approved. Skipping down, Courthouse Landing, same thing. Not an EDA project, not a county project. We sold the land. They have a performance agreement. Zero has been paid to date. If they hit their performance metrics, then they will, go forward according to the terms of that contract. And all of that is disclosed in the annual audit that's put out so people can follow along. Southside Speedway is an EDA project. We own, the county bought it, and basically transferred that to the EDA. And we're working with a private developer to bring that site back to life. And then River City, for some reason, gets tossed in from time to time. No EDA role at all. That is literally just a county park. So, any questions before we turn it over to Mr. Bloomfield? And that's a lot of information in a short period of time. One last note. Mr. Bloomfield gets up to speed here. We're going to added a button to our transparency portal that will have this presentation, all the monthly financial records for all of these projects that you have seen up here. All the financial audits for the EDA itself will all be posted in one place on the website. It's all publicly available information now. It's discussed at Mr. Hart's monthly meetings. All the financials, Debbie Basie, the county does a fantastic job with that, but we've consolidated that on the county website, so you can go there, one place, and each and every month you can update and follow along right from where we leave off this slide in this presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mel.
All right, well.
That one, yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board, Dr. Casey. I'm coming to you this afternoon to give a summary update on our 2025 real estate assessment activities for this year. And starting off, this assessment and all assessments as they are done in accordance with the Virginia State Statute 58.1, 3201, and with all standards of mass appraising by the IWO standards, the Professional Appraisal Board. This year, I instructed my staff to have a target ratio, assessment to sell ratio of 993. Of that, which is plainly stated, if a property sold for $100,000, the assessment will be set at $93,000 of that. That target ratio allows for any correction in the market, any interest rate pressures that are foreseeable in the future throughout this year. I'm not pushing that envelope too hard on the assessments for this year at all. The actual coefficient of dispersion, let me go to the next slide here. The coefficient of dispersion, which is 5.81, is within the standard of deviation for homogeneous properties in the county. What that means is within that ratio, the median ratio, there's a dispersion spread of value by only 5.81%. And when we'll get into the median ratio as when we come to the next target. The total taxable land book from 24 to 25 is 65,100,000,000. That's the total from 24 to 25 increase in assessed value. Breaking that out into between residential, agricultural, and commercial industrial is 51.7 of that 65.1 billion, and 13.3 billion is commercial industrial. The increase, which is a total increase of 4.1 billion over last year, increase in assessed value, total. The percentage, overall percentage of increase from 24 to 25 is 6.54%, with 5.01% attributed to residential revaluation and 1.53% to commercial industrial revaluation. And the split between that would be, for total, would be 5.11% for residential revaluation only. That's of the $4.1 billion increase, and 4.77% overall for commercial revaluation changes.
And just for some context there, the 5.1%, that's the sort of the headlining number. The house last year, what did they change year over year on average? Last year that was a hair under 9%. It's been elevated. We Gerard and I up here, we're talking 3.5 to 4.5% is kind of our long run window. So, really getting back close to that. And then you see a very even treatment between commercial reval and residential reval, 4.8 versus 5.1. So I think like every other financial topic that we've talked about in the last several months, returning to those long run averages, same story here with revaluation.
And just to be clear, reevaluation is if it existed last year and it's currently existing, then that's the reval. New construction is not included in that. It didn't exist last year.
It's not included in that percentage. His $4.1 billion number, the big number, it is picked up there, but that's not on this slide. Yes, sir.
Correct. And just as a context, the previous years from 22 to 23, the 22 assessment was about 14.2% overall assessment increase. For 23, it was about 9.88%. 24 was 9.68%, so we're back to a more normalized increase in level, but also leaving some valuation there without going too hard on the land book at all. Of the percentage of increase total, it's projected that out of the 100%, the increase in total of the land book would be for construction, new construction growth is $911 million for new construction growth. Of that, distributed would be $3 billion for residential, which is coming in about 77% of that total, and the other 23% would be the commercial new construction growth numbers. Contributed all in for that increase, it would be 77% of the total is attributed to the residential increases, and almost 23.3% is to for the commercial industrial portion of it.
So that's north of that 80-20 split that, you hear about from time to time. So I think, and we've always said, this is probably a more realistic gauge of how that's going. What are you adding to the book each year for those two categories? And in this year, it's not 80-20, 77-23 and some change on either side. So, starting to see a relatively higher proportionate share of a contribution, if you will, from the commercial side of the book.
And a lot of the projects haven't kicked in yet because they're not complete.
Complete, yes. And getting back to just that increase overall, let's just talk about the residential increases at all, because that's always the hot topic. The 5.0%, of that 5%, the 5% median increase, 0 to 9% of the increases for last year, 87% of the properties will have an increase between 0 and 9%. 87% will fall between 0 and 9%. That gets back to that COD spread ratio, meaning roughly saying is that if the median is at 5%, anywhere north of 5.81% on either side of the median is where values fall. When you have a lower COD, it means that you are attributing to greater equity among properties as the value goes. IWO standards say that they should be 10 or below, but we had 5.8, so overall our assessments are equitable. And to the next, according to Richmond Association Realtors report, for this year from third quarter of 23 to third quarter of 24, Richmond Association Realtors reported that Chesterfield has had a 7.7% increase overall median sale price. Third in the Central Virginia area, but behind Hanover and Gooseland. So the 5.01% for residential is actually below what Richmond Association Realtors has already predicted to have happened from 23 through 24. So there's still room in the land book to whatever may happen for this year. If there's some retraction in the land book, it doesn't have to have an impact on the overall land book, and negative land book at all. And these are just some notable commercial value changes happening for this year. Apartments, that was hot topic last year. They came up last year. Apartments are increased by 4.61%, but that is mostly attributed to new construction coming online, lease-ups from last year coming online. The overall asset class has been holding pretty steady. There has been some increase in retail and shopping centers because of the recovery from COVID. As we did last year for hotels and motels, we had reduced through that COVID year because the occupancy had dropped. Occupancy had rebounded from 23 to 24. So last year we might have gone up 45% of that asset class. So that year, this year, that class is pretty stable. And for the other notables there, I would say industrial condos are up 20%, flex warehouse space is up 16%. And lastly, is just new construction for residential new construction. So it's run around 1,800 for the year, which is around normal. It's still a strong showing from what it was from the height of 21, down a few hundred, but overall it's still a strong showing of new construction for residential restarts. And that's the actual crux of the summary of what happened this year. If you have any questions.
The only other thing that I would add, the assessment notices started going out today, yesterday. So folks will be getting their own personalized version of this in their mailbox, early next week. Mm-hmm. And then for those that want to see it sooner than that, as always, the website is fantastic. Mel and his team do a really good job. Every piece of information about your property is up on the county website. If you have never looked at it, you should do that. It's really, really good. All of this stuff will be up there. I think that goes live tomorrow. So folks will be able to go out there and see how they fare. These are the summary statistics, obviously, but a wealth of information. I just want to thank Mel and his team for another fantastic job. This is again, his goal, like he always says, he wants to see him, once a year, but they work tirelessly over there, and they do a really, really good job. We were very fortunate to have a professional staff like Mr. Bloomfield and his team. So,
And just want to remind the public if that the appeal period runs from February the 1st through March the 15th. So you have 45 days to appeal. Contact our office if you have any issues, questions, or concerns.
Board members, are there any questions or comments?
I just want to emphasize, Melvin, thank you for the hard work, but also making the point that when you receive your real estate assessment, that there is an appeal process.
Sure.
You just mentioned it, but I want to just emphasize it again. I mean, there are folks that are on a fixed income, and those kind of things need to be taken into account. And that the county has a program, we're going to be talking more about that, that's there to help our constituents with that. I think sometimes people forget that there is a pathway toward identifying whether it makes sense, the assessment, all those kind of things.
Sure.
So thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, sir.
And I think it's important to note that those assessments should be received possibly as early as yesterday in the mail, but they're coming
sir.
out now.
Sure.
And tomorrow, it will be uploaded so that if you go online, you can see
Immediately.
where you're at for your particular property.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, last thing for us, just very quickly, is sort of your schedule of coming attractions. Next big thing in your budget process will really happen tomorrow. Not usually the way it is with the superintendent's proposed budget is presented tomorrow, so we don't have those details for you today. But suffice to say, Mr. Dirk and myself working with the school staff on a daily basis, and I think they're, I would describe it as they're in a fairly solid place. Ms. Spillman, Ms. Walker will continue to work on the General Assembly side, but I think we feel relatively comfortable with where they're at. But we'll be back with you with more information about that and other topics in February. But that's your next big piece. And obviously tonight we will set your max tax rate under new business. So we're not doing that this afternoon. That will be a separate item tonight. With that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Board members, any other questions? Thank you.